Welcome to the Computer Repair Podcast, episode number 279, Your Questions. I'm your host, Jeff Halash. This is our live show where we discuss the ins and outs of running your computer repair business. Computer Repair Podcast is brought to you by Ninja RMM, the simple-to-use remote monitoring and management solution. This is all the tools you need in one place to provide preventative maintenance for your clients. Try it free at ninjarmm.com/10off. Let me introduce the co-hosts. We have John Dubinsky from the Maven Group. How you doing, John?
Jeff, I'm happy to be here.
Good to have you, man. And also next to him, in the same place, in the same locale, in the state of Michigan, is Paco Lebron from ProdigyTeks. How you doing, Paco?
Better than good, better than most.
Good to have you, man. All right, gentlemen, let's go ahead. And John, we're going to have you kick it off with a personal tip or story that we could learn from.
All right, couple of quick tips as usual. Our friends over at NeoWin posted a app called Clone App, which is an interesting software application that I would compare to. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of a feedback. Any backup app. But the interesting thing about this application is it just backs up the settings from your applications, meaning like your Microsoft Office settings, or if you had some custom settings in Adobe Acrobat or something like that. So it's going to grab those settings and nothing else. My next little tip is for those that like to use the command console. Microsoft has released a PDF that is 948 pages long that has documentation on over 250 Windows console commands. So if you've ever wondered what those console commands do, your questions are now answered. And last but not least, our friends over at Comcast have a link to how to prepare for your Comcast business installation. Now, this is a great tip just to review on what you need to do to prepare for yours or your customer's installation. It's kind of hilarious in some ways because Comcast doesn't do anything that they say they're going to do in this post, but there's some great information in it. So I'll put the links in the show notes and in the chat for everybody to review. But there is good information there.
Very cool. I will say I was looking at, because I still need to call Comcast, I was looking at some of the business plans that they have. And that looks like the only way I'm going to be able to go to unlimited tier to where they don't cap my data. So I'm going to look into that tomorrow evening and see if I can get that switched over, or I'm going to drop the TV and all that stuff altogether. I'm just going with solid internet, whatever fastest speed I can get for a decent price. I'm paying well over $200 now, and I'm getting a little bit of TV for it that we don't use. So I'm watching all my stuff streaming. The other thing, too, is I was checking out YouTube Red, which that's going to be interesting to see if that can maybe cover some of the things that I like to watch.
What about YouTube TV?
Isn't that the same thing?
No.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So I was either watching YouTube TV.
Stuff too.
Oh, okay. I don't know what I was watching, but I was getting TV for basically with shows. And when I went to pay for it, it said YouTube Red. So I just assumed that's what it was. Okay. Paco, you?
So as far as for your bill concerns, cancel the TV and then call the next day, and then they'll give you back on a promo to get that bill cheaper.
Ah, good tip. Okay.
So
I like that
because I do that all the time. Anyway, outside of that, mine tip is going to be on time management. So kind of what I was talking about on my show the week before last, I got accepted into a coaching for growth program with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Illinois. And the session, we had 3 sessions that day, and one of them was on time management. And there was a good tip about where the amount of time distractions cost you. And it said that every time you get distracted on something, it takes you 64 seconds to readjust to go back to what you were doing before, if you recall what that last thing was. So for me, I'll be working on something and I get lost in that. But there are times where I'll go ahead and work on something, and then I remember, and then I'm trying to get back to what I'm doing. It's an average of 64 seconds every time you get distracted to go back and readjust to what you were doing before. So that's the one thing. The second thing is there is a big concept where not having time is a phrase that's used a lot lately. And I think I've talked about this previously several months ago, where I kind of replace not having time with things are not of a priority, because being able to say that phrase helps readjust things. And what they were talking about is, of all the things that you have to do and all the things that you have to get going, the best way to do it is to create the list like we've done before, top 25 things that you need to do. And then once you get those top 25 things that are really important, get down to the actual first 5, and then go all in on those 5. And then the question comes up is, and this is kind of something that we always do every single time, is once we are working on those 5, how do we address the other 20 that are very important? And the comment or the statement that always happens is, we'll chip away at them slowly while we're working on the 5. Basically from this time management course is saying, stop doing that. If you've decided that there are 5 tasks that need to be done, you focus on those 5 tasks. Once they're done, then move on to the other 20 and move into whatever intervals you go to. So that was something that I thought was really interesting, because I usually think of that concept of, yeah, I got these 5 things that I need to really get done, but then I have these other 20 that I'll kind of do little things here and there, and I'm diverting the focus on the 5 that I've told myself that are absolutely important to do. So 2 quick tips that got from that time management course. There were quite a lot of things going on as well, but those are 2 that I wanted to talk about today.
Awesome. Yeah, we could all, I think everybody is in the same boat when it comes to time management. Pretty much we all suck at it. And it's definitely something we need to chase and get better at. All right. So my tip for today is I have done several upgrades to the latest Windows 10 1803 with no hitches up until yesterday. I had a new tablet that I was sold from somebody here on the network, and I was reinstalling or doing some updates on it, getting everything installed, and the KB 4093112 kept erroring out, and I would restart the computer and it would do nothing and go back and say you still need to reinstall this. So anyways, I have a link on how to fix this update, because if you're using an older version of Windows 10 and you're using an older ISO and you've got this and it comes through, then a lot of times you're going to have to go back and still maybe sometimes fix this. So I have a link for that. There's just 4 commands that you have to do. You can basically copy and paste them, and they basically what they do is they reset the cache store for Windows updates and get everything back to 0, and then usually that'll fix the problem. I did try downloading it separately, and I couldn't even get that to work. So there was definitely a glitch in there. The only other thing is, I say to everyone out there, check your settings, especially when there's a big update like this. I go through this every 6 months, so you think I would understand that this is going to happen. I went to start up my mixer today, and I need to use a 1394 OHCI legacy driver in order to work with my mixer, which is your FireWire port. This was a fix that Microsoft came out with back in Windows 7 days, and it still works today. Actually, when Windows 7 went to Windows 8, I think they had a problem with FireWire. And as you notice, on a lot of your newer machines, you don't have the FireWire port anymore. Matter of fact, my last build, which was a couple years ago, I actually had to buy a FireWire card, because even the nice $400 motherboard that I bought still didn't have FireWire ports in it. So, but yeah, so make sure you check all your settings, especially, before you're going to start up. Fortunately, I've gone through this so many times now that I knew where to find the driver. I knew how to hook it back up, even though it's been 6 months since this has happened to me again. But for your customer base out there, if this keeps happening every 6 months, like Microsoft is doing with these big updates, we're all probably going to have small issues like this that are going to rear their ugly heads. And we'll find out probably within the next month or so how many complaints are out there about things that Windows has broke. All All right, let's take a quick break and we will get into our questions. If you're in the chat room, we've got questions that you can definitely ask on the show. And then we've got some topics from our secret Facebook group that we're going to talk about. All right. Our show today is brought to you by Ninja RMM, the easy to use, single pane, remote monitoring, and management solution to help you become more efficient, more productive, and more profitable. Ninja RMM understands what you need to help your customers, which is why their RMM solution is integrated with tools you use every day. With Ninja RMM, you can have a faster fixed response time and offer preventative maintenance to your customers. Ninja RMM provides patch management, antivirus, email, SMS alerting. You can be up and running quickly with minimum training time. Plus, there are no contracts, so you can focus less on stress and more on your customers. That's what we all want to do. Ninja RMM also offers things like remote support. You can use TeamViewer or other things to remote into your customer's computer and take care of the problem even before they know there's a problem. You've got backup. They're using Cloudberry Backup, great backup system that you can actually monitor and go from there. You have network visibility inside your RMM, easy to read dashboards, and a powerful device search to create custom queries and export the list to keep your customers up to date on the hard work you do for them. Actually, your software is doing a lot of that work, but you can show them that it's worth having it there. You also have an executive style report showing important system metrics such as health score, software added or removed, hardware changes, and TeamViewer connections. Ninja RMM is offering Podnutz listeners a free 30-day trial, and when you decide to buy, a 10% discount. Take advantage of this offer. Go to ninjarmm.com/10off. All right, your questions answered. So if you are in the chat room, feel free to start putting those questions in the chat and we will get those answered. But we have some things that came from our secret Facebook group that we're catching up on. And I try to do this every month, is put a list out there of what people would like to know about. So here's some of the things that we have. First one is optimizing your Google Maps listing. This says in depth. So I'm not sure how in depth you can go into your Google Maps listing. And Paco, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is off of your Google business listing that it gets that information. Is that correct?
Hang on a second, Jeff. I'm going to take this first.
Go ahead.
Paco?
Thank you. Yes, this would be under your Google My Business, which is linked to Google Maps. So as someone is searching for your business, basically you'll go ahead and depending on the search area, depending on where you are, location or proximity, that's kind of where it works out on that. So this would be the Google My Business is what they're calling it now. Used to be called previously Google Local or Google Local My Place.
Now, I will tell you from my point of view, a lot of people will tell you, you need to update these listings. And while that may be true, and maybe you need to put some content on there, put a sale, a coupon, or update your information. I haven't updated my information in years, and I still, in my area where there is a plethora of computer repair people, I still come up number 1 or 2 in the Google Maps listing. Don't know why, but I do. So there might be other algorithms and things out there that are contributing to that. I don't know. And it is always good to update your information. Things like holidays, when your business is open. A lot of times we don't go in and change those things. And I know I get an alert from Google all the time, letting me know I need to change those, set up an email alert if I'm going to be away, different things like that in my business so that people are calling and I'm not answering the phone and they're not getting a hold of me. So there's definitely things you can do to help your listing that way. But it's pretty much simple information. There's not really a whole lot to it. Is there, Paco?
There isn't much to it. One resource I'd like to point everyone to, my former co-host, Matthew Rodella, did a interview with Joy Hawkins over on the Computer Business Marketing Show. It was on Google My Business. I'm trying to find the episode number, episode 41. And she actually gave a good webinar on this and going in real depth on how to optimize your Google My Business. But going back to kind of what you said before was how you haven't really updated your your system. Sorry for everyone. I'm a little under the weather, so I got a lot of congestion if you hear me cough every so often. So so basically what it is that I believe depending on your area, this is where Google My Business kind of helps you, or it may not be as important to you because it might not really contribute to what type of business work you're trying to get in. So for example, for you, Jeff, you're in a bit of a more of a rural area and you're only focusing on a 6x6 mile radius, correct?
Yes.
So I think in that radius, although there are a lot of computer repair shops, I think it's a closely knit community of where you're at, where you kind of know where the areas are in a stone throw away. Whereas for a lot of the metropolitan cities, like for myself, I'm in downtown Chicago and I'm in one quadrant of downtown Chicago. Google My Business is a very big component along with other search sites like Yelp and so forth when people are looking for someone to help service them, whether it's computer repair or as an IT business. So as far as that's concerned, yes, it is good to optimize your listing by updating photos, especially if the address isn't properly entered correctly. And this is something that I learned probably about a month or so, or no, about 2 months ago, is you want to put your address in that Google business listing the same way as the US Postal Service has your address listed. Now, this may sound pretty simple, but what you come to find out is, and I don't know if some of you have noticed this when you're entering your address in, like, let's say an Amazon or eBay or something like that, and it automatically changes your email to what they believe is the right or the better address. They're looking at the records of the US Postal Service. And what that is that it'll abbreviate things a little bit differently. It may format things into what they feel is the better version of your address. So for example, for my address at my current office is 10 South Riverside Plaza, and they abbreviate the plaza into PLZ. Now, the reason why this is important is for a lot of listing services that you put into, you would put in the address as Plaza, and it may not pinpoint where that is on the map. But if you enter it as how the U.S. Postal Service put it, it will locate where you are on the maps, depending on what mapping service that you're on outside of Google. So that's something to go ahead and take into effect. And it also helps your searchability as well, because you're doing it according to the U.S. Postal Service, and Google likes that all that information is matching. So that's one piece on that listing to do, and especially updating photos and the new posts feature that they released. They're really starting to like you putting posts on there as if it was the old Google Plus pages. They're liking to see posts on Google My Business listings, and that's been helping a lot of growth on that business listing as well.
That's good. Yeah, and what you'll notice going back to the zip code is there's usually a four number designator on the end of your actual zip code for your area, and that does actually mean something to the post office, and it gets it down to the nitty gritty on where you are at exactly. So that information can be very important, especially if you're getting stuff. You'll see it sometimes when you're buying something, it'll automatically get changed over to say, no, don't you want to use this address? And it'll usually have the 4 number designator on the end of that. Yep. So that's definitely good.
And especially the review system of it as well is a lot better than a lot of other services, where like Yelp and other services, they kind of filter out reviews that were provided by your customers. You may not even have asked them, but they haven't used that platform, but you provided such a great customer service or customer experience for them. They want to be able to let everyone know, and sometimes they filter them out. Google doesn't have that type of strict enforcement. So having a lot of Google reviews also helps you in your position in the area as that type of business that you're trying to advertise on that listing, and it's free. So Google My Business, you can create one today, and that helps establish a lot of the presence that you need to do online.
Very good. And I'll say this, a lot of people don't think about this, but what you probably need to do, myself included, is to schedule probably, I would say, once a month to where you're going to spend an hour or two on marketing efforts. And definitely, like Paco was saying earlier with lists, definitely get that stuff into a list so you know the first things that you want to tackle in that type of order. But if you don't do it, it'll be years and you'll go, I never touched that site, or I never did anything. So it's definitely something that I think it's important part of your business, just like your paperwork is. So
I'm going to add something on the end there, just with customers that I have using it, is if you do claim your business listing, there's two things that you can get. One, Google often does promotions where you can get a lot of marketing material to use inside of your business. It is also a way to get notified. You'll get notified when somebody reviews your business and allows you to reply to those reviews as well. And it gives you a lot of other metrics related to that on people who are viewing the pictures that you post in there and all that sort of stuff too. So claiming your business listing, updating your business listing also gives you a lot of benefits that cost you nothing as well. Because keep in mind, people are going to find you on Google Maps or Google My Business or on Google, whether you correct your listing or not. So if the information is incorrect out there, that's a negative. So you might as well claim your business listing to get all the benefits and then build on top of it from there.
very good. All right, let's go on to our second topic, is how to establish lines of business credit. And I think, John, this is going to you.
Paco?
So this is something that I started doing probably in the last 2 years or so, because establishing business credit has been a big thing for me as I start to try and rebuild my personal credit. And rebuilding or building business credit is very difficult sometimes to really try and just to get it. And there's no real clear avenue. There's no real clear direction or resources that I found trying to find it until I ran into a company called NAV, and I've talked about them before, NAV, Nancy Alpha Victor, and they used to be known as Creditera, and essentially they are the Credit Karma for those that are familiar with that app for personal credit. They are basically the business credit helpers for businesses. Now, they have a platform that kind of helps guide you into understanding that there are 3 different type of tiers for credit and how you can establish credit for you. Now, the first tier is going to open up trade line accounts, meaning you're going to open up a net 30, meaning you are going to buy stuff from their company and you will pay them in 30 days or within 30 days for their product. And that is establishing a line of credit with that particular business. And they list out a couple businesses, which is one of them is Quill for supplies. There's Granger, and then there's a couple other ones as well. Now, each individual vendor will have a way of what looks good so that they can report it out. So for example, with Quill, you have to buy something at least over $50 and you have to pay them by check for them to report out. Now, some of these businesses, unlike personal credit, they don't have to report to the business credit bureaus, which for business credit bureaus, those are the ones that are looked at the most are Duns and Bradstreet, Experian Business, and Equifax Business. Those are the 3 that are used in the business world. And they necessarily, the particular vendors, don't have to report to them unless you request those vendors to report to them. Whereas with personal, they report already to TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax on a default basis. So that's something to look into on establishing those trade line accounts, getting a good rhythm with those 3. And then once you go ahead and get those 3, then it allows you to go ahead and graduate to tier 2, which allows you to open up accounts like opening up a trade line with FedEx, opening up a trade line with Shell, or BP for gas, and that ends up working out for your favor because now you have one particular card that can help with a lot of those expenses and help you with tracking, but also establish your credit as well. And then once you kind of move through that tier 2, then you get into the tier 3, which is what everyone wants to get, is getting a business credit card for your business, being able to go ahead and get some commercial funding, things like that, depending on where you are in your business. These are kind of the 3 tiers or levels to establish your business credit. But I really do suggest you go to nav.com. They do have a free account that you can sign up for. And then if you want to get into more in-depth stuff like other reports, other details and analytics, then you can pay their monthly or quarterly fee. But everything that I told you about as far as the guide on how to establish your credit, they have those resources in the free account that you can select to.
All right. John, anything from your end on business lines of credit?
Well, just like personal lines of credit, just make sure you use your business line of credit responsibly. Responsibly, excuse me. You get a big influx of cash. Big companies, they get a lot of funding, often don't spend that money wisely. So just remember, in a small business, that money always goes out faster than it comes in at the beginning as well.
Thank you. And
especially take a look at the APRs as well, because those interests are going to kill you. So don't accept everything you get accepted for.
Well, and the other thing too is I'm going to be the guy who says, don't worry about a business line of credit, just use cash. But I know in certain circumstances when you're starting off, it's hard to, if you're doing a big purchase order for equipment, and you're trying to get started in your business for business clients, I understand that's something, but I have this rule of thumb, because it's very easy with any line of credit to go down that road to where there's no light at the end of the tunnel, or if it is, it's a train coming at you. And so you want to be careful, and I'm speaking from experience. So you want to be careful with any of those things. Cash is king, as a lot of my customers will tell you, because they love to pay me in cash for some reason, because they think I'm going to give them a discount, which I generally don't. But hey, I still get the cash. It spends the same. So yeah, just be careful with that, and like John said, be responsible.
So one thing to add on before we move on, I'm going to disagree with Jeff not on the cash part, but you should not be getting a credit line to purchase equipment for your client, because what's going to end up happening is if they go back on it, yes, you can get reimbursed and refunded on the items that you paid for or whatever. It doesn't refund the interest that was charged that you got to end up paying anyway. So, and plus there was a guest that was on the podcast many years ago that says you're not a bank. When you're first starting out, you get payment of equipment up front. I remember there was a time, and I was lucky because there was a client that wanted about $3,000 or $4,000 worth of equipment. I ended up having the funds and put it through. Luckily, they paid me, but what ended up happening is the day that I installed the equipment, I only installed part of the workstations, and we kept the server in the room. They hadn't called me back for almost a year to come back and finish the install. So I would have been stuck with that bill had I asked for like 50% deposit or whatever. I would have been paying on that bill or paying on that funds for equipment that I didn't even have possession for. So especially for equipment, always get it paid for. Personally, for labor, always ask for 50% down. That's just my personal opinion. Once you get after 50% down for a project rate, then once you're done, get the other 50% for labor.
That's a good point. And yes, there's always a way. There's always many ways to skin a cat. If I'm doing any type of project or I'm buying any type of equipment, I do not pay for it. The customer will pay for it, and I will get the money, and the money will be released to me, whether it's deposited, check, cash, whatever. And then I will buy the equipment, and we'll continue on from there. Labor, it depends on how big the project is. A lot of times, you're 10, 15, 20 hours. I go with what it is. Again, it's one of those things where you kind of got to know your gut. And if your gut is telling you something is wrong, it probably is. So I only work with people that I'm pretty sure I can trust. Now, it's not 100%, but I've never been bitten with anything real big. Not in this industry anyways. Real estate, that's a whole nother deal. Anyways, all right. So business lines of credit, different ways to do it. I'm not sure that you need it for really a lot of circumstances. I think we've kind of proved that point all the way around. Build your business, do the work. There's a lot of things you can do in your business to create income, and I think you just need to go from there. John, there are some questions coming in from the chat room, and I know you're having a little conversation. Do you want to bring some of those in, or do we want to talk about some of those before we continue on with the rest of our list?
I'd roll with the list, Jeff, and I'm collecting some information on the questions that are coming in, and we'll hit them at the end.
Awesome, man.
Okay.
You're the man. All right. So this next one, and I'm not I've got my 2 cents on this one. How to work out of email, inbox zero or keep everything. So I'm going to start off with this one because I've seen it both ways. And I'm going to tell you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there is definitely one wrong way of doing it. And that is keeping all of your damn email. I mean, all of your darn email. The problem is
The mouth on this guy.
I don't understand the people out there. And I've seen this in businesses, man. People will just keep every single email that comes in. They're like, one day I might need that. So the next thing you know, you're turning around and you're trying to fix their Outlook, or you're trying to fix something on their email account because they have just so much garbage. Or they're like, hey, why is this so slow? Why can't this go any faster? I don't know. You have 15,000 emails in there. What do you think it's going to do? And so I don't understand this whole mentality of keeping things. Now, from my standpoint, and I didn't do this for a long time, but what I did in the beginning was I kept separate email accounts, personal, business, whatever. And so I had these, maybe podcasts or whatever. So I would keep these separate email accounts, and I didn't learn about folders that you can create until later. And now there's these things that John could tell you about called rules that you can have when certain emails come in, they automatically go into these folders. Now I haven't set any of that stuff up. I do a lot of manual drag and drop because I'm looking at everything, but I try to keep my inboxes to a 0. So in other words, I want to look at an email and I want to deal with it. Either it's getting a response right away, or it's going to go in a folder for later that I either need to take a look at it, I need to respond to it at a later date, or whatever that is. But I only try to keep the things in the inbox that right now needs to be dealt with, top priority. Everything else gets moved out. So when I get in there, and it's not every day, I try to keep it down to a minimal. I won't say it's inbox 0 because it's not, but I try to keep it down to a few, because the problem is with the way my brain works, when I'm looking at those inboxes and they're all kind of together, Paco was talking about earlier, man, my brain will space out and I'll be 64,000 seconds one way and just lost. And then I'm like then I'm down a different rabbit trail. So I try to keep everything simplified. That's how I do email for me. Paco?
John?
Thank you, Paco. Well, I think one of the main points here too is not only the ability to keep all your email, which I do. If we start way at the top, there are compliance reasons depending on your business. I know I always bring this kind of thing up, but you may need to keep all of your email. And there are solutions to do that where you don't need to do that, where a system in the background will keep all of your incoming and outgoing email for you. Having a good label or folder system to keep that email and those conversations with clients, it might be a lifesaver at times that you need to roll back to if you need it. It also depends on the way that you work. Maybe you don't do a whole lot of contracts, but you keep your email correspondence as kind of a, hey, this is what you told me to do, and this is why we did it. So keep that in mind. But the link, I don't remember who brought this question up, but the link that was provided goes through some things where I don't know if Paco is just as smart or maybe he actually read through the link before this, but it was more about distractions. Whereas having your email open may actually be distracting you and ruining your productivity. Now, it depends. Email is the primary way, since I'm a solo tech, that I encourage customers to reach me. So I use it as a triage system. So email is always interrupting me. I look at every email, the phone's vibrating, I'm checking that out. But I love the new snooze feature built into Gmail, because a lot of the times you have to train yourself that you do not need to react to every piece of email that you get right away. Snooze it to the end of the day. Keep in mind, if you've ever worked with a lot of clients where they may throw you the question because you're Johnny on the spot, and then let's say you just don't answer them for 30 minutes, and all of a sudden you get the email back that says, oh, I figured it out, thanks. So keep in mind that they just might be using you for a crutch, and using your email box is a way to do stuff that they can easily figure out for themselves, whether that's a vendor, a customer, or somebody else. And I like Jeff's tip too, automate your email as much as you can as well. If your email box is filling up with things that you don't really need to react to, but you want to just keep them as information, use filters and get that out of your inbox so it's not a distraction. The title of the article or whatever, inbox 0, I attain that to mean that I have a happy day. I go to my inbox and there's nothing in there. I don't know if I ever remember the last time that happening to me. But maybe that's a good thing, a small blessing in some ways. But I definitely still to this day, even though I've been doing this for as long as I have, do find myself, I don't know what the terminology is, but finding an email or knowing I have an email in there and always having that itch to get back to it and letting it interrupt me.
Go ahead. I know you got something to say, Paco.
So as I have done my email, I store everything.
Oh, we know.
I know. We were talking anyway. So there's probably close to 23,000 emails that I have over the last like 5 years, that I've had that email address. Now, so this is kind of what had happened. What had happened is that I was using Outlook with Gmail, which was a horrible sin in my part for even using that with Gmail. And my good friend John Dubinsky had shown me the light on getting away from Outlook and understanding that Gmail and the cloud email is really where it's at. What I didn't know is as I was in Outlook, I would filter all my emails into specific subfolders, helping to create the inbox zero. I didn't know because of the way that Gmail kind of does things differently and their labels. I thought for whatever reason that adding a label only labeled it, but it didn't remove it from the inbox. So you actually have to remove the inbox label. So once you do that, that helps improve your inbox, because what I didn't want is exactly like you said. I've gone through 5 years and didn't put a CRM system until 2 years into my business. And there may be something that I didn't get a chance to add into my ticketing system that I need to search for in the email to find and put into the CRM system for Synchro. So that's kind of where I was, at least in my mentality. But after being shown the light on our last Tech Brothers meeting that we had about a couple weeks ago, I don't remember when it was, but when we all got together, now it's going to be a slow burn to go through all those so I can eventually get all those 23,000 searchable, but not in the inbox blaring me in the face.
Now, number one, I've never had a problem with Outlook and Gmail working together. I'll just say that. Still don't. And so it works fine for me. But I will say, as far as the having those emails available, I treat email like I would treat an old pair of clothes. And that is, if I haven't worn it in 6 months, it needs to go. And it's now, other than what John talked about for compliance purposes, yes, for compliance things, for customers, that stuff does need to be archived or put in some form or fashion where you can get back to it. I definitely agree with that. That's just part of compliance. It's something new that we're definitely having to do today. I would say probably 99% of the time, if you haven't looked at that email in 2 years, you don't need it. And at 1%, it's not going to matter that much. You can figure out what you need to figure out and move on from there. That's just my 2 cents on that. So there's many different ways to do it. And I think, just so there's no confusion, because when I first heard about inbox zero, I was confused on what it meant. I thought you had to get all of your emails out of your platform, whether it be Outlook, your webmail, whatever it was, so that it was clear. The inbox is basically where the email comes into. Now, when you create folders and labels and other different things where you can move that one, maybe not labels, but with folders, you can move those into a separate folder where it is archived. And I do that with registrations, receipts, et cetera, et cetera. I do that stuff. But I want all the stuff, the fresh stuff that's coming in, to be clear in the inbox, because what will happen a lot of times, if that gets too full, there are things that get missed all the time. And that's the problem I ran into. So once I figured out folders, that's kind of the way I do it. Now I probably need to set up some rules and say, hey, if something comes in from this person or that person or this company, it needs to automatically go over here into this box where I'm dragging and dropping it now.
You know, my philosophy is just a slightly different on keeping the email. You know, I pay $10 a month for G Suite Business, which gives me an unlimited mailbox. So my philosophy is, why not keep it? Because then it's searchable and I can always get back to it. I mean, granted, I agree with Jeff 100% that it might be less than 1%, that I may never need to see that. But that 1% is pretty important to me sometimes. And Rick brings up a good point too, is in Gmail, if you're a Gmail user, and I don't know if you can do this with an Office 365 address or not, but don't forget about the plus sign if you want to divide up and do some throwaway email addresses. So my email address, john@mavengroup.net, I could do John plus vendor1@mavengroup.net. And that would equal an email address that I can then put a filter on to direct all that incoming email somewhere else. Or if I ever did not want to deal with that vendor again, then I could always just route that mail to spam or to delete right away. So don't forget about that handy little plus system. And you can use that with any Gmail address, business or personal.
Nice. I like that. Yeah, there's definitely, we probably don't spend as much time working on how to organize ourselves because we're constantly running around just trying to deal with our day-to-day business. And so again, I'm going to say this again, we need to sometimes set aside some time for these types of things. If it's an hour a month, you go, hey, you know what? I'm going to work on some email filtering, 1 hour a month. Well, after a year, that's 12 hours that you spent, and probably you have it down to a point where, hey, everything is running pretty good at that point, and there's only little tiny tweaks that you need to do to it, and maybe you can move on to something else. But if you never get started, it never gets handled, and you're looking at it day after day.
And don't forget your service providers, just like with Gmail, are probably adding new features all the time. You know, don't get distracted with them like squirrel or something like that. But keep in mind, there could be a new powerful tool that they've added that you might find very useful. Like in the new Gmail, we talked about the snooze command, which might be a great way to eliminate that email from your inbox, eliminate your reaction to that email until maybe you're back at the office at the end of the day.
Now, the gentlemen here were laughing at me when we got together last because, yeah, I did something that was, I thought it works for me. I basically recorded my voice and told me what emails were coming in. So I use those as my notification sounds. So if it's a business email, I know it. If I want to even pull my phone out of my pocket, if it's just a general email and I don't really care, I can go back to it later. But if I was to have the notification on all my email boxes, I'm like John. I would be pulling my phone out every time and looking at it. And it got to a point where when you're talking to your spouse and you're kind of looking at your phone and things are coming in or a ding comes in and you grab it, it's kind of a rude thing when you're sitting there talking to somebody, even a friend or whatever. So once I noticed myself doing that, I noticed I needed to change something a little bit. And so that's why I recorded those.
Yeah, thank goodness for a smartwatch. And Jeff, we just realized what everybody already knows. You just like the sound of your own voice.
Absolutely. That's why I do this show. All right, moving on to,
ladies and gentlemen.
You heard it here. All right, so the last topic we have before we get into our questions is how to remediate cloud outages for customers. Who wants to start off with this one?
I'll take it.
All right, go Paco.
John.
Well, the link that was put into the Facebook group is a good one with the Datto product, which is the Datto DNA. And I will push everybody over to listen to our good friend Marvin B. at Podnutz Pro, because he talks about testing this unit where he had, I believe, success at one location and a failure at another. And believe it or not, Paco, you brought up a great suggestion regarding this. And you'd have to go back a couple shows, more than a couple, a little bit of homework for the listeners, a couple months, where we talked about I believe it was a Netgear cellular modem that you can plug in. So top level, let's just talk about how to fix this from a technical perspective. So maybe one way to do that would be what's called a cellular backup, where you're actually using a cellular SIM, just like in your cellular phone, to provide a backup internet connection should their main provider goes down. So on most business class routers, you will have the ability to have at least 2 WAN ports on your router, 2 ports on your router where you can connect an internet connection. And you can either use these in what's called a failover setting, where WAN port number 1 is your primary internet. If that goes down, the system fails over to WAN 2 port, or you can bind them together. But in this scenario, we're talking about failover. So let's say we have Comcast as our primary provider, and then we set up this Netgear box, which is a cellular modem, to be our backup. So Comcast goes down. What happens? Generally, your router or UTM device will say, hey, I'm noticing that WAN port 1 is down. And the way that it's doing that, it might be pinging a gateway. It might be trying to ping out to some sites. You can usually program in that device to say, try this many times or for this long a period of time. And then once you determine that you're down, fail over to WAN port 2. So in this case, you could have a cellular provider on that WAN 2 port that would then pick up. Keeping in mind with a cellular provider, you probably either have a limited bank of data, or you might be paying a lot per gigabyte, or so on and so forth. So the bill for your customer and or for you, depending on how you're billing it, could get pretty big pretty quick, depending on the amount of users and what you're allowing them to do. Now, usually the hard part on this is if you don't have a good piece of equipment, a lot of routing or UTM devices will not fail over backwards, meaning Comcast comes back up and it fails to go back to the primary WAN port. On a good piece of equipment, that will happen, but I do see, like back in the day when I used to use Cisco small business gear, it would not fail back for me. It would be a very painful process. Usually I would have to go back and manually do it. So I'm not having that problem on my Calyptix boxes. They are failing back, but that's just something to keep in mind too, because you wouldn't want a customer to be stuck on that secondary WAN port for days on days using that cellular connection. The other thing I would recommend in the short term is just providing your customers some sort of FAQ or a little sheet that says, here's what you do when the internet is down. Because a lot of the times, especially with like a cable provider, a nice modem reboot will get them up. So there might be some simple things that the customer can do prior to calling you or to avoiding a truck roll for you.
Anything to add, Paco?
Get a WAP box.
That's a great tip, Paco. So if everybody doesn't know, the way that you can set your WAP box to work would be if the WAP box realizes the internet goes down, and again, you can do that. You can set it in a couple of different ways, to ping an IP address, to ping a gateway, something like that. You can then say, well, the WAP box knows that your cable modem is plugged into port 1 on the WAP box. Go ahead and reboot it, and keep rebooting it every couple of minutes until the internet comes back up. So you've just automated that process that you were going to put on that worksheet to give to your customer. So I think that's a pretty great tip.
Awesome. Now, from a standpoint, first of all, I want to say that the links that were added to these topics that our secret Facebook group came up with, these all three came from Tim Taylor, who actually added an email to me with these 3 topics, because we were going to talk about them last week and we just never got 2 of them. So we'll definitely have the links for all this stuff in the show notes. As far as the simplicity of, it depends on what your customer is doing. One of the things I'm playing around with is I'm using OneDrive. Thanks, John. And I'm using OneDrive so that I've kept my business folder on OneDrive. Now, the interesting thing that you can do with things like OneDrive is any computer that I'm working on, maybe has my set of tools or maybe has my documentation for my business or whatever, I can basically have it where it keeps it on a computer, or I can just have it where it's saved in the cloud, or I can have it where you can just access it from the cloud. But there are certain computers where I've turned it on to where I want certain files so that if this computer that I'm sitting in front of dies, I can go right behind me. And even if I have no internet connection or anything, I can still get to those files and do what I need to do. The other thing, too, is with cellular service, a lot of times, if you're setting your customers up to be able to get their business email, which a lot of companies do, through their cell phone, then a lot of times people can still get emails and things even when the internet is down and they're used to using webmail or whatever. So there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of remediate that. But I think it comes back to the point of, and John alluded to this, it's doing something in the beginning to protect yourself before it actually happens. That's what you want to do. You don't really want to wait till after the fact and then go, hey, now what are we going to do? Kind of have these, have these conversations. So at least when your customer comes back to you and says, hey, we can't work because we can't get to the cloud. Yeah, I know. Back in February, we talked about this, and I said you might need to do this, this, and this, and you said, no, we're good. At least you had that conversation with them, and then they can go, oh, well, can we do that now? Yeah, but it won't help you right now. But yeah, we'll get some things set up in place for you. So, anything else, Paco? I know you got 2 cents. Nothing. All right, man. All right, John. You have been collecting the questions from the chat. You want to talk about those?
You bet. First one I found in there was from Rick, and he said recommendations on expanding reseller service offerings. And his example was an anti-spam email service. Off the top of my head, just a little list, and I'm sure you and Paco might be able to add to this. And I'm hoping guys in the chat will throw in some more. As I was thinking, you could do DNS filtering. You should be charging for your AV product. You might be able to do patching, backup for sure. I charge my customers for remote access through a third-party remote access service. SMTP as a service is definitely one you could do. Email, as Rick said. VoIP services, you should be adding a VoIP product. It's easy to partner with somebody and make a little money on that. Print services was a big one that we learned about on the last Channel Pro. Maybe cameras, DVRs and NVR services, installing and managing that for customers. Paco, you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, internet service providers. Partner with a rep such as for myself, I have a rep for Comcast Business. Send over whatever leads I can get. If they close them, there's a little bit of money on your end. Plus, it could be a provider that you have good history with, or they're pretty solid as far as connectivity versus service, whoever you may work. And if it's an independent that you work with, see if they have an affiliate program and be able to partner with them and get a little bit of affiliate referral money in your pocket that way. And you can also, from a lot of the things that John talked about, you can offer levels to those particular items. So maybe right now you're offering backup, file-based backup to a client, but maybe you can charge a little bit more for image backup. Maybe you can go ahead and charge for amount of endpoints versus an all-in-one type fee. If you only had one computer at the time, customer expanded to 4, and you kind of just rolled it all into it. You can also look at it on different levels. Same thing with like anti-spam, email, things like that. Look at the things that you're offering and see if you can break them up or add things to it as levels to get a little bit more revenue from what you probably already are charging them right now.
Now, Paco, how did you get that business rep from Comcast?
It is basically a family friend connection.
Okay.
Is how I got a hold of them. But what you can do is if you go to compute for like myself for Comcast, I think it's ComcastBizLead.com, or just go on LinkedIn, see if there is a Comcast business rep in your area. This program is a national platform. So for those that are in the US, just search for a business rep or go to a meetup that may have a Comcast business rep around there, work some type of partnership with them, and they'll be able to register you under them as your rep to go to for these type of things.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, I think you guys have pretty much covered everything as far as just make sure that you're getting paid for whatever services you're providing. And a lot of times we will walk into a business and we'll be dealing with whatever the main problem that we're called out for. And they'll, hey, can you take a look at this? And if you're billing per hour or whatever, that's fine. If it's an all-you-can-eat platform like John does, then, there's different things that are allowed under that agreement of what you're going to cover and what you're not. And if you're adding things to it, whether it be a service or a workstation or another server or whatever it is, you got to make sure that you charge for those things. I think a lot of times we think, oh, we're already there. Here's what we're here. We can take it. Oh, I can take care of that in a minute. Doesn't matter. Again, you need to get paid properly for what you're providing.
And don't be afraid to create your own service as well. I mean, there are going to be times where you can kind of make your own thing, put it together and make that its own package. I had an example in my head, but I lost my train of thought. But it was one of those where you can probably bundle some of these where it's a particular package versus adding, nickel and dime. If you're worried about nickel and diming your customer, maybe you assemble these bundles and then kind of go through levels on that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And here's the thing. There are lots of different thoughts on this. And I, to be honest with you, do not know exactly what the correct way is. But I have settled on for myself, when you're looking at offering packages or tiers or whatever you want to call them, I used to do what everybody else does. Offer 3, they're going to go for the middle one. And then I started thinking about it and I go,
which is statistically proven, by the way.
Yeah, whatever. I'm a simple guy. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to offer a beginning program and I'm going to offer a high-end program, which is going to take everything, but it's going to cost considerably more. So the person that just needs a little bit of basic coverage is going to go for that lower plan anyways. And that's kind of what I'd seen. The people that really need to be covered with everything that's in this other package, they're going to pay for that because they actually need the things that are in this package, whether it be whatever. And there's different ways to do that. Could be you're giving remote support with it, you're giving whatever. I like to keep things simple, and I don't know that I don't want to have, I wouldn't do a nickel and dime thing where I'm going to do, hey, this costs this much, and like have everything out in separate things. I'm going to do like what Paco said, and I'm going to tier it in some form or fashion. You just have to figure out which way is going to work better for you and figure out what you're going to offer in those packages. But, to tell somebody, hey, I'm going to charge you $1 a month per workstation for anti-spam. Just throw it in a package that covers backup and anti-spam and, whatever, antivirus, all that kind of stuff. Just have that stuff in there that makes sense all in one package. Don't try to do it out separately where you're $1 here, $1 there, because people are going to look at that and all they see is the dollar plus. And so that's just my 2 cents. Keep it simple.
So here's my question for you.
Yes.
When you offer the 2 plans, do you give them both at the same time, or do you gauge them and then say, we can put you on this plan, I think this is where you should be comfortable with, or you can do this plan? How do you present?
I offer both.
Okay. So the only reason why I have seen a increase in closing someone with 3 than 2 is when someone is given 2 choices, they often can't make a choice and they won't choose either. So the reason for 3 is in their head, all right, I don't want to get the cheapest because it's cheap and there may not be enough support. The most expensive is overkill. I'll stick with the middle because that's probably where I want to be at. So the reason, and plus as a business, if you want to sell more of one thing, if you shift it over as the middle one and make some, like you said, some expensive or just high exorbitant third product that no one will get except for the elite, you'll sell more of the one you really want to sell as the middle one. But going back to how you said, I think it's all about presentation to the customer, exactly like we just talked about. I think you can do this so many ways, whether you have a base plan of a bundle, and then if they want something, you just add it to the bill as it kind of goes along. And then you're not really nickel and diming them because they're requesting it. But as long as you got a good baseline of what you want to do, whether it's all labor and then you add all the services, or you bundle a basis of, hey, for me, you have to go with my plan of 1, 2, and 3. Once we go ahead and get one of those bundles, if you need something additional, then it's an additional fee per month because you wanted that extra service instead of you trying to rack your brain on including everything in a bundle. And you're just going to end up reshifting versus just being simple, kind of like what you were saying. Simple is best for not only the customer, but for us too, trying to figure out what's the right pricing in the pricing game.
Yeah, and I guess from my standpoint is my 2 prices between the 2 are so far apart that there's a you're going to pay me hourly, or you're going to get this managed service plan, or if you really want all the coverage that possibly can come to you, then you're going to pay a high exorbitant price for this plan. So I really do have 3 tiers in some form or fashion, just not 3 tiers of my managed plan. You either have hourly, you have the simplified managed service, which you're still going to pay a good amount of money for, and then you have the higher end managed service, which is going to give you even more. So in the prices are far apart. So and I'll put some of that stuff. I'll actually put my plans in the show notes of this show so people can check those out there. I know I've given out some documentation to some people that have contacted me before with my pricing structure and kind of what I've done. And this is just this is a one thing I will say to this is it is an always moving target. And Paco can attest to this. It doesn't ever stay the same. You're always thinking of new ideas, new ways to do things, and how to either streamline it or just make it better. And so there's that.
Pretty much.
All right. So let's take a quick break and then we'll go back into some more questions. All right. If you guys want to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/computer repair podcast. And I want to thank one of our newest Patreon supporters, Krista Schweitzer. Thank you, Krista. Appreciate that. And I want to thank all of our Patreon supporters for your continued support. It is awesome that people are willing to give their money and, and not only that, but a lot of these same supporters are showing up week after week and contributing to the chat room with questions and whatnot and having a good old time. So we really appreciate those out there. Plus, you have the secret Facebook group that gives you access to John, Paco, myself, and others where there's a lot of good collaboration going on. Not, look, you idiot, I don't know why you don't understand this, but here's the way you need to do it. It is a, hey, here's my thoughts on it. Maybe this will help. Maybe it won't. I don't know. Some people, man, they write novels when they're answering questions, which is awesome. Definitely appreciate everybody that's contributing not only to the podcast, but also to that secret Facebook group, because it's what we need. Everybody needs help at one time or another. All right, John, next question. You're up.
Well, just want to go around on this. I'll put a link to the Watt box if nobody knows what we're talking about in the show notes as well. And JD also brought up that Datto now has a product that does something similar. So if you're a Datto reseller and you already have that, that'd be a nice little tool to add to your control panel or your cloud control panel as well. Also, JD is adding, it is very important to work on your business as well as in your business. So JD's been drinking our Kool-Aid for sure. His question is, do any of you go to network meetings or chamber events? I have done both. It has been a long time since I've done either. When I was first starting out, I was in a BNI group, which proved to be very lucrative and very informative. So I did like that. And I did go to some chamber events as well. Never as a sponsor, just as an attendee. Paco, you got anything to add to that?
Yes, I've done both. And I think the biggest piece of those events is I've built a lot more partnerships that have become very helpful, because a lot of those have turned to either resources that I can go to or resources for my clients that I can refer to. So those have been very beneficial on that part, and have acquired a couple clients or leads through that avenue as well. But I think the biggest benefit is going into those for relationships. That's really where the key is for networking events and chamber events as well.
Very good. And for me, no, I don't like people. Now, here's a good point, and I'm going to bring this up because Rick just posted this in the chat. Not a BNI morning person, and I'm saying this with all kinds of love.
Are you now?
Yes, I am. That's kind of like saying not really a money person. I really don't want new money. I don't want more money coming in. I just want to keep with the way things are. Sometimes you do have to make, in this business especially, you have to make sacrifices. And you'll hear, and what I've heard over the years is that when it comes to BNI groups, it's usually, especially the people that have been in for 10, 15, 20 years, they always tell a story about how they were in a BNI group or a chamber group at one point, but their business got to a point where all of a sudden, hey, I'm not really looking for any more business, so I don't really need to do that anymore. So again, a lot of these things are short periods of time, but you do make, what I will say, in any networking event. This is throughout any industry. You'll make good contacts, like Paco said, that you might not use now, but maybe you'll use down the road. All right. So, yes, and I probably should be going to networking events. I just don't want to. But I'll admit that I don't want to. Let's see. John, next question. Do we have any more?
We had a question in the chat about where the show notes are. I'm not sure if that's a serious one or not, JD, but if you are looking for the show notes, hit the podnutz.com webpage, click on the episode, and you will find where Jeff has diligently listed just about everything we talk about on every episode.
Now, John,
the other thing is if you're in the chat and you want to ask a quote, I'm making quotation marks here, what you might think is a stupid question, which there is no such thing, you can PM me, and that's a private message. And if you PM me with a question, I will not say your name when I ask it, but we're happy to discuss it. So pop it in there if you got something you want to ask and you don't want your brothers or sisters to know about.
That's good. Okay. Good.
I'm a Leo, by the way. I'm sure that'll get in there.
And Rick says, my tired morning face will not promote business. And you know what? And I'll be honest.
Rick, I've seen your night face.
Yeah. So. Is your night face any better? No. The reality is everybody's got to know their own strengths and weaknesses, right? And we all have them. And that's why we come together as a group. So yes, if you're not a morning person, I get it. It's not something you want to do. My point was, though, you could do something for a short period of time if you needed to boost sales, boost your business, different things like that. And I don't know, have you guys heard, as far as BNIs go, it's usually a 50-50 shot. It's like 50% of the people are like, yeah, this is awesome. And 50% of the people are like, eh. And I attribute that to there's going to be different groups. And if one group's not working out for you, you need to go to a different one.
Right. I agree. I think it's the group. I think it's the commitment of attending, and quite frankly, the finances. I think it's like $500 for you to join with a $200 to $300 setup fee, and those starting out may not have $100 to drop up front like that. I think it's a matter of understanding that BNI can be potentially a sales force for you, and depending if you're in a good group, you're going to be in a group that they're always going in there to try and find leads for you, along with you trying to find leads for them. And I think it's easier to look for somebody else than it is for your own business. And that's kind of what I've seen on some of the BNI meetings that I've been a part of. It's just a matter of if it's one of those three that can be a 50-50 chance on each individual item on whether BNI makes sense for a business owner or not.
Let's be honest, there's many, many different things you can do to get yourself out there as far as in the community. It's coming up to summertime now here in the north, and because of that, quiet Floridians. But right now it's becoming nice out here. So there's a lot of parades and different things that are going on. I know Patrick Palmer, who's been on the show before, he goes out to almost all these different parades in the area he's in, and I think it's Minnesota. And he will buy those Frisbees or candy or whatever, and he'll be in the parade. Which a lot of times you don't have to pay money to do that. You can throw Frisbees are inexpensive. You have your logo and stuff on them. You throw them out to people. The kids have them, and it's front of mind. A lot of times when people see those and they have a computer problem, they go, "Hey, there's a guy that was throwing these out at a parade. I'm going to go ahead and contact that person." So there's definitely different ways of doing that. But from the business side, I think BNI or a good chamber would be the way to do it. Now, this begs the question, though, because it depends on your service area, too. I see a lot of people that they travel so far in their service area instead of niching down and concentrating in their local area. And I know a lot of people will say, well, I don't have that many people. Listen, there's people out there that literally in their small area, they might have a few thousand people and they're running a full-time business just fine. So when I look at my area, and a lot of people laugh, I was thinking about what you said earlier, Paco. No, I'm not in a rural area. I'm actually in the city.
Sure you are.
6 by 6 square mile radius. I have 93,000 people. in a small area like that. So for me,
compared to Chicago, that's a rural area.
well, okay. Compared to sizes, you're right. But I'm also not, I don't deal with the traffic. I can get anywhere in the city in 15 minutes or less.
They can only get those 6,000 square foot homes so close together out there.
Well, you know, that's north of me. That's not my city. I don't hardly travel up there.
So Mike L asked the question saying if it's worth joining BNI if you're only doing break fix. Mike, if you are doing break fix and you are doing this full time and or having a location to drop the PCs off, whether it's a home or an actual location, then yes, it's definitely worth it. If you're visiting people as well, it's definitely worth it. But if you're not doing it full time, I don't know if you're going to get the amount of resources. And I know from when I was at my last couple BNI meetings, they were mentioning that BNI as an organization only takes on full-time business owners. So I don't know if that's just a Chicago thing or if that's a international thing, but that's what I was told when they were talking about requirements of joining on BNI. But definitely if it's break fix and you're in a great area, it probably will be worth it to you if you're doing it full-time. If you're doing it part-time, there may be some other avenues that your effort could be better used, especially resources for that.
Let me say this too, and a lot of people don't really think about this. When you think about anything that you've ever gotten in your life, and there's people out there that disagree, but if you really go back and think real hard, even down to the jobs that you've had, a lot of times the reason you have those jobs or the reason you got this deal or that deal, it's usually because of somebody you know. We all know somebody, and we're all not separated that far apart from each other. Here's the thing. A lot of times because a lot of people ask about breaking into business. And from the break fix side, I can tell you that if I had the time, there's a lot of times I deal with personal customers' computers that own businesses. They own hair salons. They own, real estate offices. They own whatever. And because of that, I can basically, a lot of times though, if they get tired of their tech person or whatever, or something happens, a lot of times they'll go, hey, do you do business support? I said, yeah, but here's my hours. Here's my availability. Here's what I can do for you. And a lot of times they'll, okay, that's good for them because we've talked back and forth on sometimes you need to be Johnny on the spot. I just don't believe it's in every situation. Most times I don't think there's emergencies. People will differ on that. That's fine. Whatever. From what I've seen, people can still operate just fine, even when their computers are down. Now, whether they are throwing a hissy fit or not, that's a whole different story. But they can still operate. We're still going to do what we do, right? We're human beings. So anyways, from that standpoint, I think a lot of times you can get those business clients from the break fix customers that you are taking care of right now. And it takes time. And usually it's years sometimes. And then once you go into a business and they'll talk to other business owners they know, and that's usually kind of how it spreads out. And a lot of people that have gone from break fix to business or a hybrid thereof, usually that's how they got there. They didn't really go in and I hear people going in and walking the streets and going into businesses, and that's fine. You can do that. And it does work. It's going to get that again. You're networking, you're getting that word out that you are in this business, you're available if they ever need that type of support. But usually it's by somebody you know. Nothing? Really? I know you want to say something, Paco. John?
Another quick tip in the chat. If you're in the free note chat on the web, it might vary by what client you're using, and you want to send a private message. Just select the username from the right and then select message, and that'll allow you to send a private message. Some guys didn't know how to do that.
Very good, John. Yeah, I need to, I want to switch this over to the chat wing, which will give us more easeability to, easeability. That's a word I just made up. It'll give us more ease of use to be able to do some of the things we want to do. Give us a little bit more power, I guess. Not that I need any more power. All right, John, any other questions in the chat room?
That's it for tonight, Jeff.
Awesome, man. And I think We have no emails this week. So send your emails, and we will definitely read them on the show. Or you can even send a voicemail, and we'll have that number for you to send that off here in a minute. But hey, I think this has been great. A lot of good subjects from the secret Facebook group. A lot of good. And this is the other part about the secret Facebook group is you have some power to kind of put in our ears what we're going to talk about on the show, because we want to talk about things that you guys want to hear about. But you can also do that via email and so on and so forth. So email, we got voicemail, all kinds of ways to contact us. John's got an email, Paco's got an email, and we'll kind of go from there. So anything else we need to cover? And looks like we just lost Paco. And there he is. Okay. And
around doohickey, sorry.
Paco, before you get bumped off again, let people know where they can find you at.
No, that was totally my fault. I meant to hit maximize and I clicked the bookmark. So I got out. What was that again?
Just let people know where they can find you and what you're up to.
Oh, sure. You can find me over on Twitter, ProdigyTeks CEO, ChiteKCEO, or you can find me over at Tech Life, formerly known as Podnutz.
Awesome. And John?
Facebook.com/private Facebook group.
Awesome. Appreciate that.
Correction, that was Podnutz Daily, not Podnutz.
Okay. I kind of knew what you meant. All right, come join us live for the Computer Repair Podcast every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern over at podnutz.com/CRP Live. Except for next week, there is no show. It is Mother's Day. Go hang out with your significant other or your mother, or make a phone call or whatever. There's many things you can do that day. Or just
love you,
enjoy
Mom. I'm sure
outdoors.
she's listening.
Exactly. You can join in on the conversation by hanging out in the chat room, which we've had plenty of people hanging out in the chat room asking questions today. You can send an email to podnutz@podnutz.com or leave a voicemail at 734-335-1000. Send that voicemail and we will put it on the show. I want to thank everyone for listening and subscribing to the show. We'll see you next time on the Computer Repair Podcast.